Good evening, Atlanta, and everyone who is watching and listening. This is the Health Wave on Radio Live, and Victoria Barayev is with you again. We are discussing one of the most difficult diseases that it presents itself to us, which is diabetes, the fastest growing disease. 29 million Americans have it, and 86 million Americans have prediabetes, live with the condition that can turn into diabetes at any point of their life. The seventh leading cause of death, diabetes, has the most deadliest complications posing to our health, and more chances to develop things like glaucoma, blindness, arterial disease, and then cataracts, you just name it, gangrene, a lot of potential health risks. And someone who has diabetes can tell you that this is not fun to have this condition, because you don't know how to get rid of it. You don't know whether it's curable or not. So if you have diabetes, or if you are afraid that you can get diabetes, what are you doing about it? What are your steps? Do you believe that it's possible to cure diabetes? Of course, we know that there are different types of diabetes: diabetes type 1, diabetes type 2, and type 3. Type 1 diabetes, we know it's not curable. It's the type of disease that is categorized as an autoimmune disorder. But type 2 diabetes is what we're talking about, more referring to tonight. So the question is, how are you going to get rid of your diabetes? And it's time to take charge. It's time to take this disease into your own hands, because the good news, diabetes can be cured. And in order to understand what can be done about it, you really have to understand the disease itself. We have to understand what causes it. And this is where we're all confused about the cause of diabetes. So let's just take an excursus into the history of diabetes in order to understand it better. But once you understand what causes diabetes, then the rest comes easy. Then you definitely know how to cure it. About diabetes, there is a lot written, and the history of diabetes is so long that it's really hard to trace the dates of, different steps and different milestones in the developing of understanding diabetes. But it can be traced back to the 5th century BC, when an Egyptian physician, Dr. Hessi, their doctor, observed sort of a disease where people had frequent urination, and weight loss was associated with it. And what they found out, that frequent urination also meant very sticky urine that attracted ants. This is how people observed this disease. And of course, people died a lot from diabetes back then. And then going forward, 100 years from the beginning of our era, there was a Roman physician, Areteus. He was the one who defined the term diabetes first. So the term diabetes means loss of sugar. Basically, when the sugar spills into the urine and we lose it through urine. This is how diabetes got its name. And the first diabetes treatment involved not a diet, but a type of exercises, horseback riding, because they believe that horseback riding helps to relieve excessive urination. And it's not until almost 1800s, almost the end of 1800s, when people started prescribing a diet in order to cure diabetes, in order to help this condition. And of course, people kept dying. People kept dying from this disease. And it was still unknown what causes it. They observed the symptoms of the disease, but what caused it was still unknown. Later, in the middle of the 19th century, they learned how to determine diabetes through doing tests. So basically, they learned how to check sugar in the urine and then in the blood. And from that point on, the development of understanding diabetes went a little bit faster. Towards the end of the century, end of 19th century, two scientists, Mering and Minkowski, they realized that there is an organ in the body that is responsible for this disease, and the organ was pancreas. So they removed pancreas from animals, and this way caused diabetes, basically. And then the same year, 1889, Paul Langerhans, there was a scientist by the name Paul Langerhans. He discovered a cluster of cells, he called them islets. So those cluster of cells inside the pancreas were observed, but he couldn't explain what they were. Basically, what he observed were beta cells that produce insulin that we know now. But those beta cells are still called islets of Langerhans to this day. And only in 1921, basically what we say 100 years ago, two scientists, researchers, Bunting and Best, those two people, they learned how to get insulin from this organ, pancreas, and from the tissue of pancreas. And then in 1922, people already learned how to administer insulin to the diabetic patients. And at the same time, there was another brilliant doctor that became one of the leading specialists and experts in diabetes. His name was Elliot Joslin, who was in Boston. Elliot Joslin, he really knew that in order to treat diabetes, in order to minimize the number of dying people, to save lives, people had to follow a certain diet for diabetes and also do exercises. And then it's not till later in the 20th century, 1960s, 1970s, when people really learned about chemical structure of human insulin. And then they learned how to create this insulin, synthetic insulin, by genetic engineering. So basically, when we look at this history, starting from 1920s, when Best and Bunting learned all about insulin and how that can be administered to diabetic patients, that's when the medical direction took its turn in the way that it started using insulin in order to treat diabetes. We'll be back to Elliot Joslin later, because that man was truly brilliant. Look at this now. How is diabetes treated today? You go to the doctor, you get diagnosed. The doctor tells you you have diabetes. What do you get? What kind of a prescription you get? You get medications. There are quite a few that exist out there. Some medications, they raise the levels of insulin in the body. Some medications make your body less resistant to the effects of insulin, and hoping that this will help to control diabetes. I recently was in a doctor's office, sitting and looking at the brochures on the table. One of the brochures caught my eyes, and it said, "Learn how to control diabetes." So it's not believed that diabetes can be cured. So it says we can control diabetes. And what's believed to be in control of diabetes is administering medications and insulin injections if it needs to be done. So you get your prescription, the doctor tells you you have to go home, you really have to get on a diet, you have to lose weight, and you have to take your medications. You go home, you religiously take your medicine, and your diabetes doesn't get better. You gain weight. You come back next month, the doctor says, "What have you done? I told you to lose weight, and you gained 10 pounds. here's more medication. You go home and continue doing this, and the vicious cycle does not stop. Why is that? Because insulin makes your body store fat. One of the insulin's jobs is not only to help drive sugar into the body cells, but also insulin drives fat into the body cells. And that's how this vicious cycle never stops. And what happens then? You become more and more diabetic. There is no end to it. Diabetes leads to complications. This sugar circulating in the bloodstream then affects your eye nerves, affects your arterial nerves, your feet nerves, and leading to major complications. We went to one of the medical offices in Atlanta, Atlanta Food Care Center, and interviewed one of the leading doctors in that food care center, Dr. Dwayne Lay. And we would like to offer you this interview about the potential consequences of diabetes. Here you go. Hi, Dr. Lay.
Hi, good morning, Victoria.
Good morning. First of all, thank you so much for agreeing to give us an interview for the Health Wave on Radio Life.
No problem.
And for finding time to do that.
No problem at all. My name is Dr. Dwayne Lay. I am a podiatrist here in Atlanta, Georgia. I have been practicing in Atlanta now for going on 4 years. I've been in practice total for 8 years. And I do everything from regular routine foot care to diabetic wounds to reconstructive surgery of the foot and ankle to dealing with patients at facilities as well too.
So I understand you deal a lot with diabetic patients. Why is that?
I do. Diabetic patients come in to see us typically every 2 months or to every 2 to 6 months just to ensure that their feet are okay, their circulation is in check, their sensation is in check, to ensure that they have not developed any new wounds or ulcers, or what we call pre-ulcerative lesions, where they develop calluses that turn into ulcers later on down the line.
Mm-hmm. So out of all the patients that come here or generally see a podiatrist, what is the percentage of diabetic people?
Oh, wow, pretty high. Probably about 70 to 80%
Wow.
of our patients are diabetic. And the reason being is that we have a lot of places now, especially in Atlanta, where people they can go to a Starbucks, they can go to McDonald's, they can go to, a Steak and Shake, they can go to all these different fast food places that are within less than walking distance of their homes. And a lot of them are not eating healthy, they're not really drinking water, they're not exercising, they're grabbing a quick meal, and that usually is something that they're eating either too late in the day or too early in the morning, and that's leading to them, aside from things like genetics and poor malnutrition and lack of exercise, that's leading to them getting diabetes at some point.
Wow. So diabetes presents a lot of complications for people, with the eyes and kidneys and damaging nerves and arterial health, as well as the health of our feet. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the serious complications that you can...
When it comes to diabetes, one of the biggest things is the sympathetic nervous system. And an individual that is diabetic does not adhere to keeping the sugar levels within a normal range, which most doctors usually tell you is anywhere between 80 and 120 milligrams, and an A1C of less than 7, then it affects their nervous system. They start to develop things like neuropathic issues, where they can't really feel on the bottom of their feet, or they can't really feel on their lower extremities at all. They start to develop microcirculatory issues. The smaller vessels in the feet are usually the first to go. Their vessels will harden, they will calcify, they become what we call sclerotic, where the blood will get down to the area, but it doesn't fully function at 100% capacity because of the hardening of the arteries, and it prevents it from getting all the way to the toes. So eventually this winds up leading to issues with them having ulcers, gangrene, which can lead to amputations.
Wow, yes, very serious stuff.
It is.
So what are some of the things that you see on a daily basis with your diabetic patients that you don't see with other people?
Usually a lack of sensation. Aside from them not controlling their sugar levels, it definitely has to be a lack of sensation where they are unaware if they walk around on the surface barefoot or if they don't have on proper shoe gear. They wouldn't know if they stepped on a toothpick, a piece of wood, a nail. They would have no idea. And that leads to a puncture wound, which eventually progresses to a bacterial infection, which can lead to things like necrotic ulcers and progresses to gangrene.
And probably that's why it's important for a diabetic patient to see a podiatrist regularly.
I would say so. I would say even our diabetic patients who we deem are well controlled, meaning that their sugar levels are within normal range, their A1C is okay, they exercise, they eat healthy, we still recommend they come in and see us about every 6 months just to get a checkup on their feet, make sure that everything is okay. And we also recommend that they see their primary care doctor at least every 2 to 3 months to have their A1Cs checked.
And can you explain what a diabetic patient should do to take a good care of his feet? How do they need to care for their feet?
The biggest thing is making sure that they eat healthy. Their diet is probably the most important. Their nutrition, they need to make sure they're taking in adequate amounts of water. They're eating leafy vegetables. I suggest like a multi-colored vegetable variation to ensure that you're getting everything. Stay away from fatty foods. Watch their cholesterol levels. And aside from that, make sure that they exercise. Your nutrition and exercising go hand in hand. You also have to make sure you're checking your sugar levels on a daily basis. Regardless if you're diabetic and you're deemed well controlled or your sugars have been within a normal range, you still want to make sure that you keep those in a normal range because it's very easy for a diabetic patient to go off track. They can have a candy bar. They can go a couple of days of eating hamburgers or other fast food items, and that can spike their sugars up, which will affect their nervous system, which will affect their cholesterol levels, which will affect their heart as well too.
Mm-hmm. So basically, the most important thing is to create proper blood circulation.
That is correct.
In their feet.
That is correct.
And are there any things that they should not, like a no-nos when it gets to the care of their feet?
I usually tell them, I recommend to them, don't walk around at home barefoot. Always have something on your feet at all times. Whether it's a favorite pair of slippers, just something. And the other thing that I recommend to them is making sure they check their shoe gear every 6 months. We say about every 500 miles, every 6 months, you should be replacing your shoes, those that you wear on a daily basis. The other things that they want to do is they want to make sure that they keep check of their feet. Take a mirror every so often and look at the bottom of your feet. Make sure that there are no puncture wounds. Make sure that there are no calluses that look like they're leading to ulcers. Make sure that you don't see any dark spots on your feet. All of those things can progress to gangrene at some point in time and or a bacterial infection of the feet, which can lead down the line to, of course, amputations and other issues.
So using this opportunity, can you give a piece of advice to our listeners?
Absolutely. If you know that you have a family history of diabetes, you want to go and get checked. Genetic history is one sure way to ensure that you don't get the disease. And if you go to your doctor, it doesn't matter what age you are. A lot of people have a misconception that people who are over 50 or people who are over 60 only get diabetes. People as young as 5, 6 years of age can have juvenile diabetes.
That's true.
Where they're born with it. Their parents, their grandparents, somewhere along their genetic line has diabetes, and unfortunately the disease does carry on through their DNA to them. So it's really important that if you know that there is a positive genetic history, get tested, get blood work done. The second thing to make sure that you do is make sure that you're exercising. If you know that you are prone to becoming a diabetic or you know that you have diabetes, exercise daily. Make sure you're at least getting out doing walking, maybe 20 to 30 minutes a day. The third big thing is your nutrition. Make sure that you are eating a proper diet that consists of a certain amount of carbohydrates a day, a certain amount of vegetables, And no one is saying that because you are diabetic that you have to completely starve yourself of sugars, but you can have substitutions. Agave is a great substitution. Cacao is a great substitution. There are a lot of different things that you can use that will limit that sugar intake and allow you to still enjoy life. However, not to the extent where if you eat something, it's going to take your sugar levels past a range where it will be unhealthy.
One question. Do you believe that diabetes can be cured?
I do believe, I wouldn't...
I'm talking about type 2 diabetes.
Type 2, I do believe that it can. I do believe that, individuals can get to a point where they are not on medication, where they don't need to they don't need to prick themselves every day to find out what their fasting blood sugar levels are. But I think a lot of it is up to the individual. I think they have to have the motivation and the mindset to do it. And if they find that they can't do it on their own, then seek out a group or seek out a counselor who can help you to bring those levels down. It's a lot easier said than done, especially for coming from a healthcare perspective where you tell your patients, don't do X, Y, and Z or else this will lead to you having diabetes or your sugar levels being elevated. An individual has to have that personal motivation. And they need a good support system behind them a lot of the times as well, too. And if they don't have that, it can be a difficult struggle to make it with the disease.
Very well said. Thank you so much for this valuable input.
Oh, you're
and
welcome.
I wish you all the best in your practice.
Oh, thank you, Victoria.
Thank
I
you
really
so much.
appreciate that.
This was Dr. Dwayne Lay from the Atlanta Food Care Center, a wonderful doctor. If you wish to see him, call the center at 404-355-4522, 404-355-4522.
Victoria,
Yes.
I actually got a question for you.
Okay.
So
Okay.
you said that there are 3 types of diabetes,
Mm-hmm.
and number 1 is not it cannot be cured.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you mean by that?
So there are 3 types of diabetes. Diabetes type 1, what's called insulin-dependent diabetes, right? There is diabetes type 2, insulin-resistant diabetes, and diabetes type 3, which is gestational diabetes. So type 3 is the diabetes of pregnant women who are pregnant get this diabetes. And then, it's a temporary condition, then it goes away, but there is a potential consequence that the mother and the child in the future may develop diabetes. Then between the 1 and 2, so diabetes type 1, it's an autoimmune disorder where the beta cells, the ones that produce insulin in the body, in the pancreas, are actually attacked by your own immune cells and killed, so they are destroyed. So your beta cells, your pancreas, is not able to produce insulin. Therefore, you become insulin dependent. You have to have insulin on a daily basis. So if your beta cells are destroyed, it's not possible to renew them or, grow new ones. So you will be insulin dependent. Then there is a type 2 diabetes, which is insulin resistant, where your body, for some reason, which we'll discuss in just a second, stops reacting to insulin. It does not, it doesn't really utilize insulin, blood glucose due to the work of insulin. So basically, that type of diabetes, type 2, is curable.
And when you say curable, you mean curable by medicine, curable by what?
So that's what we're talking about today. So you'll see that by medicine, as we already just started saying, by medicine it's not really curable because medicine creates vicious cycle. What needs to be done is we'll discuss. Stay tuned with us. We'll definitely discuss that. But type 2 diabetes, up to 75% of people, if they really truly believe, and do what they need to do, are able to stop using medications and lead a healthy life and, really without diabetes. But for that, you have to lose weight because most of the time diabetes is associated with weight gain or obesity for the most part.
Got you. We also have a question from the listener. Can I ask you this question now?
Please. Yes.
Yes. Okay, so Janet Davidov asked, "Hello everyone. I have a question. Lately I met a person who is taking 1500 milligram metformin and her A1C is on borderline 5.8. So she explained that she is on metformin because she has autoimmune disorder, like her cell defects her own insulin, and it mostly because of POS.
Mm-hmm.
Can you please explain us, is it a risk to develop DM type 2?
Is it a risk to develop type 2?
Yeah, DM type 2.
There is always a potential risk. Especially if you take medication, it doesn't really guarantee you anything. So there is a risk. If this woman already has antibodies or autoimmune disorder, there is a risk that she can also develop another autoimmune disorder, whether it's attacking her pancreatic cells or thyroid cells or nerves, body nerves. There are numerous different kinds of autoimmune disorders, and if you have one already, there is a potential risk that at some point you can develop another autoimmune disorder. So yes, there is a potential risk for developing type 2 diabetes. What needs to be done? We're going to talk about it in just a minute.
Great.
So between like all three types of diabetes, some is more controllable, some not, some cured, some not. But I have to say that even diabetes type 1 can be controlled, and you can lead a lifestyle where you don't have to administer so much insulin to yourself, because insulin, the synthetic insulin that people have to take injections of, is not harmless. Insulin creates a lot of side effects in the body. One of them is inflammation, and like we said, inflammation of the arterial health is really a potential risk. 80% of diabetics develop heart disease, and heart disease today is the leading cause of death in the United States, even before cancer. So if you have diabetes, there's a lot of chances that you can develop this condition, heart disease. But following a proper diet, you can truly reduce the amount of insulin you have to get, even in type 1 diabetes. What do we say? The science is not confused. The science has known how to treat diabetes, has been knowing for a long time, for at least 100 years, since Dr. Joslin's message to us. And prophetically, he wrote a lot of things. One of them, he said, "I believe the chief cause of premature arteriosclerosis in diabetes, save for advancing age, is an excess of fat. An excess of fat in the body, obesity, an excess of fat in the diet, and an excess of fat in the blood. With the excess of fat, diabetes begins, and from an excess of fat, diabetics die, formerly of coma, recently of atherosclerosis." So this actually says everything. The cause of diabetes is fat, and the reason people die from diabetes is also fat. People become obese, people really develop atherosclerosis, blood vessels becomes clogged, and then you develop a heart disease. You can die from it, literally. This was said 100 years ago, and look what happens now, 90 years later. Where are we now? Are we able to cure diabetes? Do we know how to do that? Yes, we do. But the medical industry took it completely the wrong way. So we took it the direction of administering insulin and checking blood sugar on a daily basis.
And I would say people, they're scared to cure it on their own.
People are scared, people are confused, and people oftentimes believe what the doctor says. Unfortunately, when you go to the doctor, I'm not saying not to listen to the doctors. You have to, absolutely. But when it gets to the diet, and the doctor prescribes a certain diet, usually the doctor will tell you you have to eat meat and eliminate carbohydrates. Right? So the doctor will tell you, stop eating potatoes, stop eating bread, stop eating pasta, stop eating rice. That causes diabetes, because all of the things I just named, they are what? Carbohydrates, right?
Correct.
And that's what we're afraid of. We are afraid of this word, carbohydrates. So we think, okay, carbs turn into sugar. Carbs are sugar, basically. So in the body, they break down into glucose. So then what happens? We'll have a lot of sugar in the blood, and that causes diabetes. Wrong.
That's what doctors tell us.
That's what the doctor will tell you. So the doctor will prescribe you a diet that would be full of meat, maybe lean meat, but eggs, poultry, dairy, of course, and no carbohydrates, which is completely backwards. It has been known already that for at least 100 years, like I said, that carbohydrates do not cause diabetes. Never did, and they are not the cause of diabetes now. Look at Japanese people who live in Japan. They eat rice, they eat carbohydrates, they eat rice all day long, even white rice. Do they get diabetes? No. But when that Japanese comes to live in the United States, there is a question, we'll answer it in just a second. When that Japanese comes to the United States, very quickly he can become diabetic. He has 400% chances more to develop diabetes, and he does develop diabetes. Now look at this. Standard American diet, SAD as we call it, came to Japan now, right? So in the form of McDonald's, people have a lot more chances developing diabetes there, because it has been known already that the cause of diabetes is the fatty diet, the diet laden in fat, standard American diet. Yes, there is a question.
Yeah, Janet, she wants to discuss further. So as you said, like obesity is the one of the reasons, and she wants to ask you, but there is so many people with normal weight who has diabetes type 2. Working as a nurse, I see and meet people with normal weight. Mm-hmm. How can you explain that?
So that is also explainable. If a person is not obese, right, it does not have weight gain, it doesn't mean that his body cells are not toxified with fat. It doesn't mean that the fat did not accumulate inside the cell or outside the cell. Not necessarily meaning that he would be obese. But the reason of diabetes, as we're just about to explain, is fat in and around the body cells that actually blocks the ability of blood sugar enter the cell and develops resistance to insulin, where insulin is not able to do its job.
And the people with normal weight, they can have this
They
condition?
can have diabetes type 2. Yes, they can. I've met a lot of people with type 2 diabetes. So we're leading to the next point. We just said that sugar does not cause diabetes. There is plenty of scientific evidence to this. Even back in the 1920s, there were fundamental studies. For example, a study by Dr. Shirley Sweeney in 1927. What he did, he took a group of his students. Students like to eat for free, so he fed them. He divided them into 3 groups. One group was fed a high sugar diet, no fat, just high sugar diet. Then the second group was fed a lean meat diet, less fat but more protein. And then the third group was fed just a standard American diet. People could have as much fat as they could, eggs and mayonnaise and everything else with it. The conclusions were very obvious. So people who ate a lot of sugar, diet laden with sugar, they did not become diabetic.
Interesting.
Very interesting, yes. In fact, the opposite. Sugar actually, the carbohydrate diet increased the sensitivity to insulin. So the body responded to insulin much, much better. So people who ate the protein diet and low fat but protein diet were sort of scored on borderline diabetic. And then those people who ate a high fat diet, the blood sugar was skyrocketing through the roof. Yeah, so this was very clear in that particular research. Then there was scientific research of Dr. Brunzell. Those are the fundamental things that are well known in the scientific world about diabetes. So Dr. Brunzell, he fed his diabetic patients with more carbohydrate diet. So he gave them more sugar, basically, like 85% more than usually, and low fat. Those people did not develop diabetes. Those people demonstrated that the insulin sensitivity, so basically insulin resistance became less and sensitivity became better. Yes.
Okay, so another question. How can you explain that people who are heavily obese have no diabetes?
People who have diabetes,
Heavily obese.
heavily obese,
Obese, yeah.
have no. That happens also. What I'm explaining doesn't mean that 100% it works the way it works. There are people who have diabetes and they are not fat. There are people who are obese but they're not diabetic. In fact, what is diabetes? Diabetes is, or insulin resistance, right? What we call insulin resistant diabetes. It is the body's adaptive reaction to the circumstances. Our bodies are so smart. They always want to perform at its highest rate, right? So no matter what stands in the way, we always want to do, the body wants to do the best job that it can do and at its highest level it can. So no matter what. Now, when we eat a fatty diet, we eat a lot of calories, right? What happens? We gain weight. Eventually, the fatty cells become fattier and fattier. Then the body develops a protective mechanism, basically a reaction to the circumstances. The body wants to stop gaining weight so that a person does not become as big as his house. And what does it do? The body decides to become insulin resistant. So I will stop reacting to insulin so that insulin does not drive more fat into my cells. Again, reminding the job of the insulin is to drive fat, not only drive sugar into the body cells or glucose into the body cells so we can burn it for the energy, but also driving fat into the body cells. And this is just one of those mechanisms of the body that we have naturally for the times when famine comes, when there is no food, so the body accumulates fat in case it has to use it when there is no food around. It's just one of the body's mechanisms to do. So we become resistant to insulin. However, some people do not have this mechanism. So those people who are obese, they don't have this mechanism of protecting itself, and they become fatter and fatter, bigger and bigger, and they don't develop diabetes. So that happens also. So I would say that having this mechanism is probably better, that your body responds to things, and tries to protect itself. So, yeah, it's very interesting, all of those body mechanisms that we have. But basically, insulin resistance, again, it's one of the body's protective mechanisms that some people don't have. That's why they become obese but don't develop diabetes. Doesn't mean that they don't have other diseases. Someone who is obese can have high cholesterol, can have poor arterial health and heart disease and many other complications. You choose your battle. What can you do? Then the next point is Again, we've already known the science is not confused. Our practitioners are confused. We are advised the wrong type of diet. Now, interesting analogy I have to also bring up. There is Dr. Neil Barnard. For those who doesn't know, Dr. Neil Barnard, he is one of the leading nutritional researchers in the United States that is leading a company called PCRM. You should probably go and Google him and watch a lot of YouTubes with his lectures. Very interesting guy. So he gives a very, very interesting analogy about insulin resistance and how the mechanisms of the body work. So you take a body cell, right? And what does insulin do? The insulin's job is to open up the lock into the body cell so that it can accept glucose into itself, right? For the further ability to burn it. So when that lock is clogged up with fat, let's say in our situation, with a lot of fat, then the insulin is not able to open this lock. What do you do in order to fix the situation? You have to clean out your cells from the body fat, from the fat that comes from your diet as well as the body fat. So that's a very good analogy. And as well, talking about research, researchers back then in the 1920s, 100 years ago, knew all about this condition and how to cure it. And researchers today, medical researchers as well, do a lot of things in order to spread this message across. I have to mention the names of Dr. John McDougall in Santa Rosa, California, who does a tremendous job getting this message across, educating people, and treating his patients, able to help them stop using medications and insulin right away, the first day of the diet, basically.
Wow, that's scary.
It is scary, but
shouldn't be just steps to do the diet? And actually my question is, assuming I have a good vegetable diet, veggie diet, and my fat is going down, how can I know when I can reduce my insulin?
Okay, so this question has to be addressed to your doctor. But I'm telling you from the experience, many people, by the time they get an appointment with the doctor and see their doctor, time goes by, but they need to have their insulin reduced. Many people do it on their own. Slowly but surely, they just reduce their insulin.
You know why? Because then you come to the doctor. He said, you cannot reduce your insulin dose. You cannot do this.
Right, you cannot. Technically speaking, you cannot, but people do that. I've had clients who came to me, we changed the diet. On their own, they had to reduce insulin, and successfully, I'm not encouraging people to do it on their own. You really have to do it with the help of your doctor. You have to tell your doctor, I'm going on a diet, on a, plant-based diet, let's say, and less like low-fat diet. Please help me adjust my insulin and keep monitoring my condition. So you have to make an agreement with your doctor to do that. Okay. The thought I was talking about researchers today. I mentioned the name of Dr. McDougall, Dr. Neil Barnard, who wrote a wonderful book tackling diabetes. He has a whole program on diabetes. Then all the other doctors, Colin Campbell and Dr. Esselstyn and Dr. Matt Lederman, Dr. Michael Clapper, and just name it, just a few more doctors who are really, it's not a lot, by the way, not a lot of doctors understand this concept, that bring this message across the country, trying to educate people about this. And they've done tremendous work, and an amount of efforts that they put into their work that I could not mention their names as well. So, cleaning your body cells from this excess fat. How do you do that? Now we came to the diet, to the main important question, most important question that people probably have tonight for me. The diet, again, it says for itself, The diet has to be a low fat, and within it's just a matter of days, 1, 2, 3 days, when your body starts to change and really adapt to this new way of dealing with blood glucose. And you'll quickly notice that you need less insulin, less medication. How do you notice that? Because your blood sugar drops. So not only from the diet your blood sugar drops, but also you still keep taking medications and insulin injections for some people. So you'll realize quickly that you need an adjustment. So trying a new diet, you really have to remember that very quickly you would have to be working with your doctor to do that.
Yeah, and I have a question. For example, if your sugar drops dramatically and you're on a high dose of insulin, isn't that dangerous?
Of course it's dangerous. No, that's why you have to, take care of this in advance.
So you have to be under the doctor's supervision.
You have to be under the doctor's supervision, but usually people who have diabetes, they know how to deal with this situation, because when you take insulin injections, it doesn't always work smoothly, where it controls your blood sugar and you never experience rises or falls. You eat something, and plus then you make an insulin injection. The next morning or in the middle of the night, you can wake up and your blood sugar is very low. So with these fluctuations of blood sugar, people always deal with it, being diabetics. This is one of the disadvantages of having insulin shots, because people have to go through this turmoil on a daily basis. And usually these type of patients, they already know if that happens, they have something sweet by their side, so they can take it in immediately to bring the sugar up. But when you turn to this plant-based low-fat diet, what happens, because it is loaded with fiber and vitamins and nutrients and healthful carbohydrates, your body quickly starts to adjusting the level of blood sugar on its own. By the way, fiber is one important ingredient that helps to stabilize blood sugar in the body. And it's very important, Let's say if you want to eat something sweet, you crave sweet, but you have diabetes and you can't. So what's the best choice? What would be the best choice? The best choice for you is something sweet that has fiber in it, and that would be fruit. Okay, so with fruit you would be much better off, because fiber, it surrounds the glucose molecule, the sugar molecule in the body, and does not allow it to be absorbed into the bloodstream so fast, raising the levels of blood sugar in the body, right? So fiber is important. It helps to keep it at the steady, stable levels for the most part. Therefore, you have to make sure that you have plenty of foods loaded with fiber, like whole grains, like vegetables, whether they are red or brown or yellow or green, white, all colors, purple, they all are wonderful. So vegetables that are different colors, like yellow and red, they are not so much loaded with carbohydrates, or I would say starch, right? There are more starchy vegetables like sweet potatoes, squashes, pumpkins, potatoes, which are also okay. And you have to check and monitor and see if your blood sugar goes up or not in order to adjust the amount of those type of foods. If you use them without combining with added fat, like oils or animal fat, then your chances of having blood sugar go up much less.
Would you suggest to start with vegetables and plants that less starchy and has less sugar, or it doesn't matter?
You have to have a combination, a balance of all of those things. One thing I would strongly suggest is not only include all the food groups, all the plant-based groups in one meal, like whole grains, beans, and vegetables, but also make sure that you have plenty of leafy greens, cooked leafy greens on your plate. Okay, so leafy greens like kale, collard greens, bok choy, arugula, mustard greens, just name them, dandelion greens, and then also salad greens as well. as well as cilantro and parsley and dill, those type of things. So they should be a part of your diet even for breakfast. One of the important things for breakfast would be oatmeal. So oats, as we know, have the ability to lower blood cholesterol levels. And a lot of diabetic people, they have heart disease, and they usually have high cholesterol, high blood pressure. So all of it comes in one package. So having things like oatmeal for breakfast helps a lot, with maybe low glycemic or low sugar berries, right? Like blueberries or strawberries would be fine. Small amount of nuts would be okay, as long as you don't have added fats into the diet. Basically, you don't take a bottle of oil and pour it onto your salad or pour it onto the skillet in order to fry pancakes, let's say. And then another important ingredient would be including legumes, beans, all kinds of beans. Beans actually help your kidneys, and it's a source of plant-based protein that is assimilated in the body much better than animal protein. Do we have another question?
Yes, we have a question. Are the videos available in Russian on same topic that you have done? If yes, where can they see it?
Thank you for this question. Yes, there is. There is a 2-part lecture on diabetes on in Russian that I did personally, and it's on my channel, YouTube channel, under Victoria Barayev. 2-part lecture on diabetes. And as well, I would encourage you to go on YouTube and just type up names of Dr. Neil Bernard on diabetes, Dr. John McDougall on diabetes, and you'll be able to find plenty of information, lots of wonderful, insightful lectures that will just enlighten you. And
even in Russian language?
Oh, those are in English,
questions
yes. In Russian language, my 2-part lecture on diabetes, I think, would be very nice to watch. Again, just go to YouTube, Victoria Barayev channel, and you'll be able to pull them out, find them there. As long as the recordings of our radio shows, all are there too. So let's continue. You have a plate. We've got whole grain. What are whole grains? Some people tell me lentils, whole grains. Wrong answer. Lentil is a legume. So we've lost this connection to our food.
Wheat?
Whole grains. Yes, there are whole wheats, of course. There is brown rice. It's a whole grain, right? Brown rice can be long brown rice, short, medium, all different kinds. All different kinds of rice: black rice, red rice, green rice. We have a wonderful selection in Atlanta. If you go to a farmer market, we have plenty of different farmer markets here.
Buckwheat?
We're lucky. Buckwheat, of course. Millet.
I have heard about the buckwheat, by the way, that some people, if they eat buckwheat, not cooked, it reduced sugar very well.
Yes, of course. In fact, as you may know, in Russia, buckwheat is prescribed by the doctors for diabetic patients, and as well as buckwheat in Italy is sold in drugstores as medicine. Wow. By the way, because it's so medicinal. Yes, buckwheat is very rich in iron and minerals, and it helps to stabilize blood sugar very well. Yes, although raw buckwheat is hard to find and hard to eat, buckwheat that is sold in the stores, even though it says raw, most of the time it's slightly roasted anyway, because otherwise it develops green bugs inside. Yes, so more grains. What can we name? We didn't say about barley. Whole barley and pearl barley. It's like brown rice and white rice, but whole barley is one of the magic grains as well. Makes you very strong and helps you tremendously with, it's very filling and very nutritious, barley. So all these wonderful grains. We also did name quinoa. Quinoa is another grain. You can mix them up together. You can create wonderful dishes, but that's starch. and starch should be the basis of your diet, complemented with vegetables, legumes, small amounts of fruits, and maybe nuts and seeds.
We received another question in our studio. So the question is, how can someone see you for a private consultation?
Very good question. You can call me. My phone number is 678-437-5668. 678-437-5668. You can also find my website, victoriabarayev.com, to get more information about it. And the consultations can be done in private, in person, if you're in Atlanta, or they can be done online, Skype or FaceTime as well.
Are you available to make a company group lecture?
Absolutely. Company group lecture. We can also do cooking classes. We can do group cooking classes. I'm very mobile and flexible. Anything that can help people progress in terms of their health goals, we provide. Just name it. Go to my website, victoriabarayev.com, to be able to see more information. Again, I'm encouraging you to take charge of your health into your own hands. We have just a couple more minutes left, and I want to
really interesting theme. Maybe we can do it next time again, or somewhere soon.
Do what?
Because I believe there are some more questions that people have about this problem and how to cure it.
Yes, absolutely. What I would encourage you to do is to write to our Facebook page, The Health Wave. Send more questions straight to the Health Wave page, and we'll be able to answer them either in another show or privately. We'll see. It depends on the how many questions we'll get, sent to the studio. We'll be more than happy, and we'll address every single question that will come to us.
Sounds good.
Yes. And I want to leave you with the message that most likely the economic trend is not going to change very soon, most likely, because the economy is so big and so difficult to change. You just have to take charge of your own health into your hands. Don't be afraid. Try a plant-based diet. Try a new way of eating, and give it a full 3 weeks before you're able to see any results, before you're able to say, oh, it doesn't work, before you get discouraged. And then after 3 weeks, we can talk again, whether or not you liked it and what kind of results you produced and what can be done next. I'm encouraging you not to be afraid and try a very well laid out plant-based diet, very well balanced with whole grains, legumes, vegetables, some fruit, nuts and seeds, and I promise you'll be happy. We'll see you next time, next Thursday, on the Health Wave on Radio Live. Be well, stay healthy, we love you, and see you next week.
Наполни жизнь смыслом. Радио Лайф.